everybody, and welcome to the Deep Dive. We're diving into something today that's been making headlines, and I bet you've seen it too. It's AI in the classroom.
Yeah, it's everywhere.
Specifically, we're talking about AI tutor, like ChatGPT. We're going to be looking at how they could be changing the way we learn to code.
Right.
You guys sent us some super interesting research from the University of Cologne and the Rotterdam School of Management.
Oh, yeah, I read that one. It's fascinating.
They've been studying how students who are learning to code at the university level, how they're using these large language models, those LLMs.
LLMs, everybody's talking about them.
Exactly. And we are going to unpack all of that research today together. We'll see if these AI tutors are they're cracked up to be, if they really live up to the hype or if it's all just smoke and mirrors.
Well, let's find out.
Okay, so the researchers, they started with two big questions.
Okay.
Almost like two sides of the same coin.
Okay.
One side is that maybe these LLMs are like having a personal tutor, like on demand. Imagine if you had this incredibly smart study buddy and they were always available. They had read every coding textbook there is.
Yeah.
And they could explain things to you in a way that just makes sense, like in a way that clicks for you.
And that's not that crazy, right? I mean, LLMs are trained on tons and tons of data, so their knowledge base is just massive.
Right.
And on top of that, they can kind of tailor their explanations to how you're learning.
Yeah.
It's something that a human tutor can do, but an LLM can do it on a much, much bigger scale.
Exactly. And when it comes to coding specifically, the research highlights some really cool things that these LLMs can actually do.
Well, yeah. Like what?
Things like problem solving. They can generate code.
Really?
They can even reason about code kind of like a human programmer would.
Wow.
But so this is where it gets a little bit interesting, kind of the other side of that coin.
Uh-huh.
The researchers, they were also a little bit worried that maybe students would start to lean too heavily on these AI tools.
I could see that.
It's kind of like, relying on a calculator before you even understand, basic math.
Oh, yeah.
And in coding, it's really, really important to actually grasp those concepts, not just to get the right answer.
Yeah, absolutely.
If you're always just copying and pasting code from an AI, but you don't understand why it works, then you could be missing out on developing those critical thinking skills that you really need to be a good programmer.
Right. You're not really learning the how and the why.
Exactly. So to test out all of these ideas, the researchers did two different types of studies.
Okay.
First, they looked at data from the real world from two university-level Python courses.
Cool.
So instead of watching the students use ChatGPT, they actually did something pretty clever.
Oh.
They compared the students' code to the code that ChatGPT would produce.
Interesting.
And if there are lots of similarities, then they figured, okay, that student might have been getting a little help from their AI friend.
So it's like a digital fingerprint, kind of.
Exactly.
They didn't see who was using ChatGPT directly, but this comparison gave them a pretty good idea.
And you know what they found?
What?
They found that if students used ChatGPT for the problem they were working on right then, it actually helps them get better grades.
Oh, that makes sense.
It's like having a coding expert looking over your shoulder, you know?
Yeah.
But here's the thing, there's a catch.
Okay.
Students who used ChatGPT a lot for past problems actually did worse on later assignments.
Huh. So it's like they weren't really learning it for themselves.
It's like they were getting this false sense of confidence, maybe.
I guess so.
Think about it. If you only ever looked up the answers online, would you really learn the material?
Probably not, no.
That's basically what this is saying. So to really dig deeper, the researchers took things into the lab.
Okay.
They wanted to create a really controlled environment
Right.
where they could really isolate what effect using an LLM has while you're learning.
Yeah, to make sure that's really what's causing the changes.
Exactly. So they set up an experiment where students were learning basic Python.
Okay.
Some of them had access to ChatGPT, some of them didn't.
Got it.
And everyone took tests before and after to see how much they learned.
Makes sense.
But here's the thing. In this first experiment, having access to ChatGPT didn't actually make much of a difference.
Really? That's surprising.
It kind of seems counterintuitive, right? But then they noticed something.
What's that?
On those computers in the lab, the copy-paste function was actually disabled.
Oh.
So they figured maybe that was stopping the students from using ChatGPT the way they normally would.
Yeah, I mean, we kind of take for granted how easy it is to just copy and paste code.
Yeah.
But that one little thing could make a big difference in how people use AI tools, for sure.
Right. So they ran the experiment again. This time they turned copy and paste back on.
Okay.
And you can probably guess what happened.
I'm guessing the students with ChatGPT access used it more.
Way more.
Wow.
But here's where the results got really interesting.
Okay, tell me.
They were mixed. If students used ChatGPT just to get the solutions, it actually hurt their learning.
Oh.
But if they used it to ask for explanations, it actually helped them learn.
So how you use it is really important.
It's huge. It shows that just getting the answer, it might make you feel good in the moment. but it's not doing much for your actual understanding.
It's like those old choose-your-own-adventure books. Remember those? You could just skip to the end and see what happens. But what's the fun in that?
Exactly.
The real learning, the excitement, it comes from figuring things out yourself, even if you mess up along the way.
100%. And it gets even more interesting when you look at different types of students.
Oh, how so?
So beginners, people who had no prior coding experience, they actually saw the biggest boost from using ChatGPT for explanations.
Makes sense. They're starting from scratch. Having that AI guide must be super helpful.
Right, but here's the other catch. They were also the most likely to overuse it, to just get the answers.
So they're getting the most benefit, but also most at risk.
It's almost like giving someone this really beautiful tool, but you don't teach them how to use it safely, you know?
That's a good point. It brings up the question of, like, how do we teach people to use these tools the right way?
And there's one more finding that we should talk about. It's kind of surprising.
What is it?
The researchers found that the students with ChatGPT access, they felt like they had learned more.
Interesting.
Even when their test scores didn't show that.
So it's like they were experiencing an illusion of learning, feeling confident, but maybe not actually mastering the material.
Right. And you might feel like you've learned something because you saw the answer, but have you really internalized it? Can you use that knowledge in a completely new situation?
Right.
That's the real test, isn't it?
It's like thinking you know a city because you've seen it on a map.
Yeah.
You might be able to point out the landmarks, but can you really navigate the streets, find the cool little spots, really experience the city? That takes more than just looking at a map.
So what we've learned so far paints a pretty complex picture. AI tools like ChatGPT, they can definitely help, especially for explanations. But there's also a real risk of becoming too dependent on them, especially for beginners.
Right.
It seems like finding that balance is really key.
Yeah.
And that's what we'll talk about more after the break, so stay with us. So we've seen that AI, it can be kind of a double-edged sword when it comes to learning.
Yeah, for sure.
It can definitely help you understand things better, but it's also pretty easy to become too reliant on it.
Right.
Especially, if you're just starting out.
Yeah, especially as a beginner.
And it makes me wonder, should students, especially beginners, be allowed to just use these LLMs like ChatGPT, without any kind of supervision?
That's a tough one. I mean, it's something a lot of educators are trying to figure out right now,
Right.
On the one hand, if students have unsupervised access, well, that could lead to that over-reliance we were just talking about, right?
Right.
Imagine, a student who just copies code from ChatGPT.
Uh-huh.
Without understanding, a single line of it.
Yeah.
I mean, yeah, they might get the assignment done, but are they really learning anything?
It's like using a GPS to get somewhere, but you never look at an actual map.
Yeah. Exactly.
You might get to where you're going, but you'd have absolutely no idea how you got there or how to get back.
And you wouldn't learn anything about the area along the way either.
Exactly.
And in the long run, that kind of shortcut, it might actually hurt students more than it helps them.
Yeah.
Especially in a field like coding, where understanding the process, how you get there, is just as important as getting the right answer.
But then again, completely banning these tools just seems kind of impossible, doesn't it?
Yeah, it does.
This technology is out there. It's changing all the time.
Right.
And it's probably just going to become even more a part of our lives,
It's true. It's like trying to put the genie back in the bottle. You just can't.
Exactly. And like you said, trying to just shut it out completely, it could even backfire.
Yeah.
Make students feel like they're being kept away from something that could really help them,
Exactly. It's like telling them they can't use the internet for research. It just wouldn't make sense.
So then how do we find that balance?
Right.
How do we get students to use these tools in a responsible way?
Yeah.
Without letting them become a crutch?
It's a good question.
Especially for beginners who might be more tempted to, take that easy way out.
Well, I think this research, it gives us some good clues.
Okay.
One of the big takeaways is that we need to teach students how to use these tools effectively.
Right.
It's not enough to just give them access. We need to give them guidance, structure, support.
So it's not like just handing them a driver's license, but no driving lessons.
Exactly.
Right.
We need to help them really think critically about how they're interacting with AI. Encourage them to ask themselves, is this just giving me the answer? Or is it actually helping me understand?
I love that. It's like those, Where's Waldo books. You could totally just look at the back of the book and see where Waldo is.
Right.
But where's the fun in that?
Right. It's the searching, the figuring it out. That's the real challenge.
Exactly. So in the context of, this research, one thing we could do is encourage students to use LLMs more for explanations.
Yeah, I like that.
Rather than for like the full solution. So instead of asking ChatGPT to just write a whole function, they could ask it to explain how to approach the problem, what concepts are important.
So it's about using the AI more as a guide, not just a shortcut.
Exactly. More like a mentor, right? Like having a more experienced programmer sitting right next to you.
Yeah, that's a much better way to think about it.
And I think educators could even design assignments that actually use LLMs as part of the process.
Oh, interesting. How so?
Like, imagine an assignment where the students get to be like code detectives.
Code detectives. I love that.
Right. So they're given some code that was written by an AI, but it's got errors in it. It's buggy. And their job is to find those errors, like a digital Sherlock Holmes.
Oh, that's a fun idea.
Right. And they have to use what they've learned about coding to do it.
That's a great way to get them thinking critically.
Exactly.
And not just passively taking what the AI gives them.
And another thing I think is really important is to really focus on the process, not just the product.
The process.
Yeah. So in coding, it's not enough to just get your code to work.
Right. It's got to be good code, well-written code.
It's also about like understanding the logic behind it, the design principles.
Right. All of that goes into it.
It's like baking a cake,
Baking a cake?
Yeah, you could just follow the recipe and get a delicious cake.
Yeah.
But if you don't understand why the ingredients are what they are, why you have to do the steps in a certain order,
you'll never be able to come up with your own recipe.
Exactly. Or like if something goes wrong, you won't know how to fix it.
You just be stuck.
So maybe educators should have students, document their thinking as they solve problems.
Oh, I like that.
Even if they used an AI for help, it's like showing your work in math class.
Exactly. It's not enough to just have the right answer. You have to show how you got there.
It's like making your thinking visible,
Right, right. And I think that's crucial, for really getting that deeper understanding and for avoiding that, what do we call it? That illusion of learning.
Right, exactly. And speaking of illusions, I think it's also important to foster like a growth mindset.
A growth mindset.
Especially with those beginners, students need to understand that making mistakes, that's just part of learning.
Yeah, it's how you learn.
If you're struggling with a problem, it doesn't mean you're not smart. It doesn't mean you're not capable.
Exactly.
It just means that you're challenging yourself. You're growing.
It's like learning to ride a bike. You're going to fall a few times before you get your balance.
Right.
But that doesn't mean you should just give up.
Exactly. And AI can actually be a great tool for helping students overcome those challenges.
For sure.
But it's important to think of it as a support system, not a replacement for learning.
Right.
It's there to help you get back on the bike, not to ride the bike for you.
That's a really good way to put it. So, we've talked a lot about the potential downsides of AI and some ways to promote responsible use.
Right.
But we can't forget about the benefits, the good stuff.
Right.
This research did show that using LLMs for explanations, that can really help people learn, especially those new coders.
Absolutely.
It's all about how you use it.
It's important to remember that AI, it's not good or bad in itself.
Right.
It's a tool, and like any tool, you can use it for good things or for not so good things.
Exactly.
So how can students use these LLMs, in a good way, a way that helps them actually learn and understand?
Well, first of all, I think we have to remember that LLMs are amazing at taking in tons of information and then presenting it in a way that's really clear and easy to understand.
It's like having a translator for all that technical stuff.
Yeah, exactly. Instead of getting bogged down in all that jargon, you could focus on the main ideas.
Makes sense.
Imagine you're working on a coding problem and you just can't grasp a certain concept. You could spend hours digging through textbooks or searching online.
Yeah, that's the worst.
Or you can ask an LLM to just explain it to you simply, maybe using an analogy or examples that make sense to you.
It's like having a friend who's just really good at explaining things.
Exactly. Another great thing about LLMs is that they can generate code snippets and examples, which can be super helpful.
It's like having a coding buddy who can give you a jump start or some inspiration if you're stuck.
Exactly. And it's not about just copying and pasting either.
Right.
By actually looking at the code that an LLM generates, students can start to pick up on good coding practices, different styles,
Yeah.
Maybe even learn some new techniques they haven't seen before.
Right. It's like seeing how those really experienced programmers think.
Exactly. And like we talked about before, the process of going through that code, analyzing it, refining, that can really deepen their understanding, help them develop their own style.
Right. Absolutely. And let's not forget, sometimes it's just helpful to have someone to bounce ideas off of.
Oh, yeah.
Even if that someone is an AI,
Right. Just talking through your process, it can help you clarify your thinking.
Yeah.
Maybe spot problems in your logic.
Exactly. So it seems like these LLMs, they can offer a lot of support, but really about using them strategically, thoughtfully, thinking of them as tools to boost your understanding, not to avoid learning. It makes me think this research was all about coding,
Right.
which is, very logic-based, problem-solving focused.
Mm-hmm.
But what about other subjects? Would AI have the same effect on learning everywhere, like in history or literature or creative writing? Those are all very different, right?
That's a great question, and it's one we're going to talk about after the break, so stay with us.
Welcome back to the deep dive.
We're in the home stretch now, wrapping up our look at AI in the classroom.
We've spent a lot of time thinking about coding, but now I kind of want to zoom out a little. Think bigger. How might AI be changing learning in other subjects?
Yeah. Subjects where, it's not all about problem solving and logic like coding.
Exactly.
That's important to think about because AI is not just going to reshape computer science, right? It could change how we learn everything.
Let's take history, for example. What does it even mean to learn history when we have AI?
Well, history is not just about memorizing names and dates.
Right. No, definitely not.
It's about making sense of the past, figuring out why things happened the way they did, seeing how different times and cultures connect to each other.
Right, and you have to think critically. You analyze sources, figure out if they're reliable, build your own arguments. So where do these LLMs fit into all that? Could they help us learn history better?
They could be amazing for, digging up information, seeing different points of view.
Okay, yeah.
Imagine, instead of just one textbook, you could ask an LLM, hey, what have different historians said about this event? And you could compare those views, see how interpretations have changed over time.
Wow, that would be incredible. It's like having a whole team of experts on call. But like you said, history's not just about the facts.
Right.
You need those critical thinking skills too. How do we make sure students are using AI to actually improve those skills, not just replace them?
Guidance, I think. Just like with coding, teachers have got to create learning experiences that use the strengths of AI, but still make sure students are using their brains.
So what might that look like, in a real classroom?
Well, instead of saying, okay, use AI to write your whole essay about the French Revolution, maybe they could use LLMs to, generate an outline or figure out the main arguments different historians have made, maybe even find arguments against their own thesis.
Oh, interesting.
So it's like they have this super research assistant, but they're still the ones driving the analysis, making the argument.
So the AI is more like a brainstorming partner.
Yeah, exactly.
Helping them explore different ideas, organize their thoughts, but not doing the actual thinking for them.
Right.
I like that.
And it's not just about research and writing. Imagine, what if you asked an LLM to create, a timeline of key events? Or maps that show how empires grew and shrank.
Okay, yeah.
You could even ask it to, imagine a conversation between two historical figures based on what we know about them.
That would be amazing. Bring history to life. But, okay, let's be realistic. Students need to know how to evaluate the information that's coming from these LLMs, right?
Of course.
Just because an AI says something doesn't mean it's true.
Exactly. It's like any source. You have to teach kids to be a little skeptical.
Right.
Where did the AI get this information? Is there any bias in how it's presenting it? It's all about thinking critically, not taking things at face value. Doesn't matter if it comes from a textbook, a website, or an AI.
Okay, so we've seen how AI could change how we learn history. But what about literature? That feels so different.
Literature is about interpretation, right?
Yeah.
Diving into a text, understanding the nuances of language, connecting with what the author's trying to say.
It almost feels like the opposite of what AI is good at.
You think so?
AI can analyze data and patterns, but can it really understand a novel, a poem, the emotional stuff?
That's a good question. LLMs might not feel literature the way we do, but they can still be powerful tools for understanding it.
Okay, I'm listening.
Imagine a student struggling with Shakespeare. They could ask an LLM to, summarize what different critics have said about a play, or to analyze the themes and symbols.
It's like having a whole team of Shakespeare experts at your disposal.
Right. And just like with history, it's about using those insights to boost the student's own understanding, not to replace it. Teachers could use LLMs to, kickstart discussions, generate ideas for writing assignments, help students explore different ways of analyzing a text.
So AI could actually make literature come alive in new ways.
Exactly. Help students go deeper, really engage with the meaning.
But what about creative subjects like writing or music? Can an AI really be creative?
It's true. Creativity feels like a human thing.
Right.
But these LLMs, they can do some amazing things.
Yeah.
They can write stories, poems, even compose music. It might not have that spark of human inspiration, but it's still pretty impressive.
I've seen some of the AI stories online.
Yeah.
Some of them are actually good. The plot makes sense. The writing's not bad. But they do feel a little robotic, like something's missing.
You're right. AI can copy the form of creative writing, but it's harder to capture that depth, the emotion,
Yeah. So how do we use these tools in a way that supports creativity without killing that human spark?
That's the challenge.
It is.
I think one way is to think of LLMs as tools for, like, overcoming writer's block, for getting inspiration.
Okay, yeah.
Imagine a student is stuck on a story. They could ask an LLM, give me some opening lines, or what are some possible plot twists? Maybe even have it write a short scene in a specific style. It's like having a brainstorming partner.
So instead of seeing AI as a threat to creativity, we can see it as a way to push past our limits, explore new things.
Exactly.
I like that a lot.
And that's something we've seen throughout this whole discussion, actually. Whether it's coding, history, literature, or creative writing, the key is balance.
Balance.
Knowing what AI is good at and where it falls short, and figuring out how to use it to help humans learn, not to replace them completely.
So it seems like we're ending this deep dive with more questions than answers, which I think is a good thing.
I agree.
It means we're starting to ask the right questions.
Absolutely.
Like, if AI can write, solve problems, even be creative, what does it even mean to learn something anymore?
Yeah, what does it mean to really know something?
Those are questions we're going to have to keep thinking about as AI becomes a bigger part of our lives. But one thing's for sure, the future of learning is going to be really interesting.
It is.
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive into the world of AI and education. We hope it's given you some things to think about.
Definitely.
Keep exploring, keep questioning, and keep learning, everybody.
See you next time. 6RT.